This is 27-year-old Adon Manzano. He was a reporter that worked for Telemundo in Kansas City, and in February of this year, this young reporter got the assignment of a lifetime. He was actually sent down to cover the Super Bowl in New Orleans, which of course featured the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles, and this is obviously, for a guy that young, a career-defining kind of assignment.
Manzano was profiled by a Kansas City station about a year ago, talking about covering the Super Bowl.
I used to dream about it, but I never expected that it was going to come that soon.
This is something that this guy, who by the way started to get featurettes made about him, could take with him, use going forward for what promised to be a very successful career in sports journalism. However, unfortunately for Manzano, he never made it back from that assignment. Unfortunately for Manzano, he ran into a woman called Danette Colbear, and she took his life because she wanted his phone and his credit card more than she cared about his humanity, and she drugged him in order to steal from him.
27-year-old sports reporter and anchor Adon Manzano was found unresponsive in a hotel room, according to police, and later pronounced dead, though the cause of his death is still unknown. A woman, Danette Colbear, is currently behind bars after authorities say they tracked her on surveillance video entering his hotel room early Wednesday morning.
A short time later, the female left and then came back, and then by 6 a.m., she left and never returned.
Law enforcement located Colbear in New Orleans late last night, then obtained a warrant for her residence, where they found Manzano's credit card, his cell phone, narcotics, and a firearm.
Now, to be clear, this is not alleged. Danette Colbear has been convicted of this crime, and due to her lengthy, decades-long criminal history, this woman was also hit with the habitual offender law, and thankfully, she was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, so nobody should have to suffer from her being on the streets again. However, we have to talk about why she was on the streets, and more importantly than this individual murder, because it is only the tip of the iceberg, we have to talk about the judge that enabled her and enables so many others. But before we get into that, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money, okay?
Criminal history does include 2 instances where she drugged a victim.
Now, it's very important for you guys to understand that Danette Colbear is not the point of this story. The judge that unleashed this woman onto the streets and signed that Telemundo reporter's death warrant, in my opinion, is actually the primary issue. But before we start breaking all that down, I want to go to this People magazine article that gives you a brief history of this woman's criminal history before she ended up in the court of the judge who is, in fact, the subject of today's video. So it starts in 2012 when this woman was arrested for robbery. Now, at the time, she pled guilty and received 2 years probation and a $2,700 fine. However, she was arrested again after she met a man, went back to his hotel room, and then he claimed that he woke up missing $100 in cash, credit cards, and a $4,000 Rolex watch. She was then caught on surveillance video making cash withdrawals with the man's ATM card 3 separate times at a store's ATM. Now, when the police retrieved this surveillance footage, they told this particular store owner that this woman was actually a criminal, somebody that they were worried about, and of course, Colbear, in her infinite stupidity, returned to the store location to make more ATM withdrawals, and the store owner ended up calling the police on her. Now, of course, at that moment in time, back in 2014, Colbear just let it go. She surrendered to law enforcement without a fight and didn't actually have any more problems going forward. Obviously, I'm kidding about this. Obviously, you know this is a joke. In fact, she decided to go out of her way with 2 other thugs, 2 other women, and attack the store manager and caught a charge for witness intimidation. Now, she eventually pled guilty to intimidating a witness, second-degree battery, bank fraud, theft under $5,000, and burglary, and she received 5 years probation. Now, this was despite the fact that she was already on probation, 2 years probation for similar crimes, but again, soft on crime is not something that's new in a place like the city of New Orleans. Now, of course, she immediately started breaking the law again. In 2016, she was charged with the purse snatching and burglarizing a home in Orleans Parish, per court records. She again pled guilty and then received 5 years probation. Now, again, I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but the point of probation is that when you do something illegal to violate said probation, you then go to jail. She violated her 2-year probation, violated her 5-year probation, and just got 5 more years of probation. You need to throw this woman in prison. I don't understand what's wrong with you, but you know, it's the city of New Orleans, so I guess that makes sense. Now, of course, she decided to shift her modus operandi to the city of Las Vegas in 2022, where she was arrested for drugging a man, stop me if you've heard this one before, in a hotel, a Wynn hotel, robbing him, and of course was caught on surveillance video using his cards, going to the ATM, and all the things you would expect from an absolute idiot habitual offender who never learns her lesson. Now, by the way, in that Vegas case, which was another drugging, the man was missing $100,000 in cash, casino chips, jewelry, and luxury luggage. Now, of course, she got bond, immediately did it again, stole $60,000, $1,500 in chips, credit cards, the whole thing, and then eventually was arrested, let out on bond yet again, and then was arrested again for driving over 100 miles an hour in Las Vegas. Again, it's like contagious. Post Black Lives Matter, all these minority criminals are treated as innocent Beba Angel Aladdins, despite the fact that this woman consistently drugs people in order to rob them. And spoiler alert, when you're an untrained idiot drugging people over and over again, eventually you are going to put too much drugs in their booze and they're going to die. And that's exactly what happened to the reporter. But again, we're not even to the judge that's actually the subject of today's video. Now, Colbear eventually got bail yet again, and then she fled and was actually a fugitive at the time that she was arrested again in New Orleans for another theft, to which she got 5 years probation. However, this constant revolving door of free passes for Danette Colbear finally seemed like it was at an end when in November of 2024, she was convicted of felony theft and felony fraud and was set up for a sentence that should have been 10 years in prison plus 5 years probation stacked on top of that, because of course, in New Orleans, they apparently always give you 5 years probation for everything. However, this is when our judge comes into play. Our wonderful special judge that actually shows us that this particular case is just the tip of the iceberg. So the wonderful and dishonorable Nandy Campbell looks over all of the facts of this case, looks over the lengthy criminal history, looks over the fact that this woman has been accused and convicted of drugging multiple people in order to rob them, and decides that the whole sentence gets to be suspended. This woman isn't deserving of serving 1 day in jail, and she releases her on a probation sentence. She gives this woman 15 years probation when she was supposed to get minimum 10 years in prison and then 5 years of probation. And 3 months later, Danette Colbear does what she's done for decades and drugs a 27-year-old Telemundo reporter in order to steal a cell phone and a credit card, leaves him for dead, and he dies.
The young Telemundo journalist and father lost his wife in a car accident last year. He was raising their daughter alone.
And here's the crazy thing about this story. Had Danette Colbear not done a trial by jury on those fraud convictions, she wouldn't have been convicted at all. She wouldn't have been on probation at all, because it turns out this judge is so pro-criminal that if you commit a violent crime, you have a 93% chance of being found not guilty in her courtroom, provided you waive your right to a jury trial. And this is the real story, the real scandal behind this particular murder that we have to get into.
They're calling on the Supreme Court to look into one judge in New Orleans. That person handling a large number of judge trials, not using a jury to render a verdict.
WDSU investigator Travers Mackle digs deeper into the data to show you why this one judge finds almost 80% of people not guilty in trials she handles herself.
So the local news starts off this segment by telling you that you have an 80% chance of being found not guilty on absolutely anything if you waive your right to a jury trial before Judge Nandy Campbell. However, that does not tell the whole story. Like I said earlier on, you actually have a 93% chance of being found not guilty if you waive your right to a jury trial in front of this judge if you're being accused of a violent felony. And here's the thing, word has gotten out, this woman has significantly more requests for a trial by judge than any judge in the city of New Orleans, than any judge in the state of Louisiana, because the public defenders know what's going on.
The marks on the victim's neck are evident.
All right, hold on,
All right. Like I said, he's going to be charged.
This is police body cam video from what officers say is a domestic abuse battery.
So this local news segment shows us body cam footage of a domestic situation where you can actually see visible injuries on the woman that's right here. And in addition to that, the suspect did us the courtesy of admitting to the domestic abuse. He actually said that he started covering her mouth when she was screaming because he didn't want her to scream.
The suspect arrested in 2023.
The only thing I did was when she was screaming, I put my hands on her mouth so she doesn't scream.
The man charged with domestic abuse battery involving strangulation and domestic abuse child endangerment.
Now, normally, this is what we call a slam dunk case. I mean, you have visible injuries, officers respond to the scene, you got statements from the victims, from the witnesses, and even the suspect in the back of a squad car while being recorded on body cam has admitted to the crime. So what do you guys think was the verdict when this man appeared and asked for a trial by judge before Judge Nandy Campbell? What do you think Nandy Campbell ended up ruling on this overwhelming evidence? Obviously, the answer is not guilty.
But in April of this year, the suspect was found not guilty on 2 felony crimes.
Would you think I was kidding? Would you think I was making this up? Did you think I was lying to you when I told you that this activist judge does not give a damn if you commit a violent felony in the city of New Orleans? If you appear before her, she will take every opportunity in order to cut you a break. The only crime that she found this guy guilty of was a low-level misdemeanor. That's it. That's the only thing. And this is despite the fact that he admitted to all of the charges on body cam video in the back of the squad car, and that was presented at court. Unless this judge disallowed that for whatever reason, who the hell knows? She is a judge, but obviously when cases end up reaching verdicts like this from this judge, you end up requesting a trial by judge when you come before her if you're a defense attorney with any kind of sense.
But it wasn't a jury that rendered that verdict. It was a judge, Judge Nandy Campbell, who records show performed 36 judge trials last year alone.
Now, you guys might be thinking to yourself, well, 36 judge trials does not sound like a lot. That's only 3 judge trials a month. That's no big deal, nothing to be too concerning. But the thing is, she actually represents 40% of the judge trials for the entire district. They have like 12 judges, and this one judge represents 40% of the trial by judges for the entire area. And this is because defense attorneys know that even if you have overwhelming evidence, including a videotaped confession, you're probably going to get a not guilty verdict. Again, 93% chance on a violent felony, you will be found not guilty if you request a judge trial before this judge.
She was a criminal defense attorney, and she was elected to a judge on a progressive platform.
Wait, this woman who gave a habitual offender who was due 10 years in prison, no jail time at all whatsoever, and then that habitual offender went on to murder someone, and this woman who finds 93% of violent felons not guilty in her courtroom ran on a progressive platform. She ran as the wokest of the woke judges. She's a former defense attorney. I am so shocked by this information. I have never seen this phenomenon before ever in my entire life, and I am of course as stunned as all of you out there in the audience looking at this revelation.
Criminal defense attorneys are very, very knowledgeable about the mindset of the judges.
Raphael Goyeneche runs the Metropolitan Crime Commission. Each year, the group ranks judges in New Orleans. This year, Campbell came out first, noted for moving her docket and running an efficient courtroom. But the number of judge trials and percentage of not guilty verdicts rendered stick out to the MCC.
Now, one of the funniest things about this judge is that before this Telemundo case, she was actually able to fly under the radar due to the fact that she is actually ranked the best judge in terms of efficiency, even though we have this weird anomaly where she's seeing a high volume of trial by judges. And the reason why she's actually ranked so high by this organization is because she is powering through her docket. She is far more efficient because she's already decided before a person walks in the courtroom that they're not guilty on almost all counts, especially if it's a violent felony. So she was able to hide up until this Telemundo case came to the forefront, but make no mistake about it, there are people out there, including one of my commenters, who was victimized by the Telemundo reporter's killer, that have contacted me and told me I need to cover this story, and boy, does it not disappoint.
Their records show Campbell did 48 judge trials in the last 3 years. 38 of those cases ended in not guilty verdicts.
Her acquittal rate was 79% over all of the cases that she tried. I took a look at crimes of violence. So these are going to be felony crimes of violence. Her acquittal rate on felony crimes of violence was 93%.
So we get a little bit more context for the numbers. We hear about the amount of trial by judges that this woman had in the prior year. And of course, we get her conviction rate or not guilty rate for regular crimes or all crimes total versus her not guilty rate for violent felonies, which again are the majority of the crimes that are being presented. Now, you guys might be thinking to yourself, Sean, you know what? That guy, evil, white, and racist. He's going after a stunning and brave, beautiful black woman who sees the flaws in the criminal justice system, and she's just targeting those flaws. In reality, these cases weren't any good at all whatsoever. But the thing is, guys, is that prosecutors don't tend to bring cases before a judge unless they're pretty damn sure that they can get a conviction. This is why conviction rates are typically around 80 to 90% depending on the jurisdiction, and in some areas you can see conviction rates as high as 98%. And the thing is, in New Orleans, you are assigned a judge at random, so it's not like weaker cases are being selected for by this judge. The prosecution feels like they have enough to get a conviction. They bring it to the courts, they get assigned a judge, and when the defense attorney calls for a trial by judge, all of a sudden the case completely falls apart because the judge is the one rigging the outcomes. And if you don't believe me, if you don't think the first example was a good enough example, get a load of this example. Get a load of this case, which, spoiler alert, is going to be ruled a not guilty case. This person who committed this crime that is captured on video is going to be ruled not guilty by this judge. If you think I'm underselling this case, just watch the video for yourself.
Here's another example. This video shows an inmate struggling with guards at the jail in Mid-City before they remove what appears to be a large blade-like object from his pants. Here it is. He was charged with bringing contraband into the jail, which has struggled with inmate violence. That suspect and his lawyer choosing a judge trial before Nandy Campbell. And records show in April, Judge Campbell found him not guilty.
Guys, come on. Promises made, promises delivered is exactly what I want you to think every time you click on one of my videos. Because we just witnessed a video of prison guards at the local jail frisking an inmate, pulling out a large piece of metal that seemed like it was going to either be used to make blades or was one giant blade. That was photographed for us. It was presented before this judge at a trial by judge, and the judge said, you know what? I don't see any contraband. You know what? I don't think that actually exists. Maybe, just maybe, that contraband actually AI generated. Maybe, just maybe, that jail person, innocent Baba Angel Aladdin, didn't do nothing wrong, and she found him not guilty. A basic case where you either have contraband on you or you don't, and the judge found him not guilty. This is a thing that has happened multiple times. And again, the more dangerous crimes, the violent felonies, that's where she's giving the biggest breaks.
What criminal defense attorneys are doing, they're making decisions that are in the best interest of their client. They're not necessarily, looking for justice. Their job is to get the best deal, the best outcome for their clients. And these numbers represent to me that the criminal defense bar recognizes that in Judge Campbell's section of court, the odds are that if you opt for a judge trial, you're going to have a better outcome than if you opt for a jury trial.
Look, I agree with this guy 100%. This is not on the defense attorneys. I mean, it's on the judge who is acting as a defense attorney from her position in her judgeship, but it's not on the people who are meant to represent their clients who are looking at this judge on the docket and realizing that there is an 80 to 93% chance, depending on the charge, again, more serious charges equal less likely to be convicted, that your client will walk away scot-free if you opt for a trial by judge versus a trial by jury. And the crazy thing is, even if your client has a lengthy criminal history, even if your client does this crime over and over and over again for decades, and you are found guilty in this woman's courtroom, she's going to give you a free pass anyway. She's going to ignore sentencing guidelines even in that circumstance. So if you're a defense attorney and you get randomly assigned this judge, you've already won. This is a thing that we allow to go on in the United States of America. This is a thing that is allowed to go on in Louisiana, in the city of New Orleans, and the New Orleans voters, I can understand voting for this because they elected this judge, but in reality, the state of Louisiana needs to remove this woman from the bench. Now, of course, they're trying to amend the rules in Louisiana in terms of trials that essentially make it so you can't just get a judge trial by requesting it. They want to add a couple of other steps, but in reality, that system worked pretty much perfectly fine throughout the long history of the state of Louisiana. It was only up until the moment that this judge waltzed her ass in the courtroom that it became a huge problem. And then when people started noticing that you could basically get away with anything, that's when they realized that this was the go-to move. But in reality, leaving her on the bench solves nothing. You think this woman has good rules on what can be included in evidence versus what can be excluded from evidence? You think this woman can even handle an obviously guilty person that gets convicted in a courtroom? Well, guess what? The first case that we talked about proves that's not the case. She needs to be removed from her judgeship immediately, right this second, yesterday even. That would be better. And maybe there should be some criminal charges because this looks like collusion with the criminals or with the defense teams. But you know what? Those are just my thoughts. I think this woman might be the worst judge in the entire country, but I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. As per usual, if you like this video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on my social media, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about madness in a New Orleans courtroom. Till next time.